What was your first student assistant interaction with Big Dog Kerry Fowler?
Well, it was when I got hired. The hiring obviously was the first time I became the assistant. I would say the first job he gave me was go to the laundry room and go fold the towels with Squirrel. I just was playing because I love the game, and it's scary to me.
It's really easy for the game to become a job.
Glow sticks in his hands, whistle in his mouth.
Man, kids out there playing the game, staying out of trouble, competing. I love it. Refold all these towels so we are as efficient as possible with this one shelf.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was that or filming. Now filming was whenever I wasn't, or when I was hurt. Nobody knew me. I was just the hurt guy. So that everybody thought that was faking. So whatever. But yeah, probably folding towels or getting somebody a sandwich or something.
A ranch sandwich.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
He tried to fire me at Christmas. And then he
Gary
promoted
did?
me to I got in the same conversation I almost got fired and then I got promoted. So I went from being a GA that was an assistant DB's coach who was the assistant coach to the head coach to being the running backs coach. Same conversation.
I forgot you went to running backs, huh?
Yeah.
How about that?
I was
Wow.
coaching them boys up. All I got to do exist between the snap and they get the ball. Everything after that's God given, baby.
We had a couple dudes like we had was it named Courtney? Were you there with Courtney?
No.
Who was your running back when you were there?
It was Savion and then the 2 or 3 freshmen.
Savion. Yeah, that's good. Savion. Shout out Savion Washington, one of the largest running backs I've ever personally been around. Yeah. Good.
All right. So something came up. We need to talk about it. I want to hear, coaching relationships after you leave a school. I've only been a part of it once, and I would say confidently that I still have a great relationship, not just with Coach Elliott, but with the rest of the staff. And you've experienced it a couple more times than I have, but I feel like the vast majority of the time it's always been on good terms because it's always been like a very understandable move.
Yeah.
Until this weekend.
Yeah. Everywhere I've been, except for one place, is I've had a good relationship after exiting. Whether it's just a nice, civil, good relationship or one where like we have a better relationship because I exited, And then, I mean, to me, the incident this weekend was funny because of who the human was. Like, to me, when incompetency speaks, those who listen but more so believe become incompetent as well. So, like, I think it was Aaron Rodgers or somebody I was listening to lately, and they were quoting somebody else, but talking about, why would you ever listen or worry about somebody who speaks about you that you would never take advice from? And that's why, like, when this human decided to speak about me this weekend, it was kind of funny. And there's a few things. So a little birdie told me that a head coach that I used to work for north of 75 in Texas decided to, he didn't say my name, but I'm assuming he probably thought that was respectful, but like was bad mouthing me. And there was like a lot of things that he could have said about me that, I would have been in reflection, like, yeah, maybe. So like he could have very easily said, I didn't think that he game planned well. And I would have been like, in comparison to now, I would probably agree. He could have for sure said, I didn't delegate to my offensive staff very well. And I would have said, yeah, I agree with that. But he chose the one thing that I feel like I have always and still am the best at, which is relating to kids. And apparently I didn't relate well to kids. And it's like, that's probably the dumbest thing you could have said. And so, I don't know. I mean, to me, I get those texts from people and it's just kind of comical. And, there's no reason to like for me to want to have to go in and justify what he said, because I don't truthfully respect what he stood for whenever I was with him, which is a big reason why I wanted to leave. Was I think when you have kids, things change, and you're looking at the environment not only of which the head coach is providing for the team, but the environment of which he's providing for your daughters or for your sons to come up to the office, and how does he handle that? And to me, it was a big no. Like, it's like, I do not want my daughter coming up here. And so, again, that's why to me, when I hear incompetent people speak, I just kind of like shrug it off, because it's like, man, you got way deeper issues, and hopefully I'll ever have. And till you get those things figured out, bless your heart.
I think it's one of the things that I've always respected the most about you and a short list of other guys is like, I was talking to a guy that's like, he's a head coach in Texas, and he said, listen, I know that the kids in this program, I know that they love, respect, and trust me, and they want to be here and they want to play for us. And I know that my staff love, respects, and trusts me, and they want to be here. Outside of that, I'm not worried about too much. And to me, that's huge. And I don't want to say envy, but I value the ability to do that, because I know that I'm a little too much head on a swivel, trying to make sure that, we're playing all angles of this thing, when at the end of the day, if you just keep in mind that you do right by the kids, you do right by the program, you do right by the community, if you can check yes to all three of those boxes, then, you can lay your head down and rest easy at night, whether or not a group of people turn on you or don't, if you've got the overwhelming support or you don't. Because I think that it's now getting to this point in my career, now it's scary thinking about, you're in a situation where it may not be good enough to win 9-10 games in a season. Mm-hmm. Look at Burnett down in Brownwood. Alum, regional finals, year and a half ago, just got non-renewed. I think he's like, his winning percentage at Brownwood is like in the high 60s, and again is an alum and got non-renewed. And like, when I think about stuff like that, to me, that plants that seed in the back of my head. Is like, well, that's why you got to play the game. Yeah. And guys like you and a couple other coaches that are like, no, what I got to do is I got to do right by the kids. I got to do the job to best of my ability, and I got to be a good person. And if I do those things, then everything else can fall by the wayside. And I find it odd that, you could work somewhere and then leave that place to go to the SEC, and it be looked at as like a shady or shiesty or like, any type of negative thing. But
yeah,
I think that it's unfortunately become more and more and more a part of this profession.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Yeah. I mean, who would say no to going to the SEC first off? Again, I think I'm trying my best as I get older to not look at things that people do as malicious and just look at them as incompetency. They just don't know any better. And I think there is malintent with a lot of things that people do. I'm not going to be stupid. I will be aware of that. But it's, dude, especially as you know, in this coaching world, like, there's some idiots out there. It's crazy. I mean, there's some people that you look at and it's like, I feel bad for those kids that you're leading, because you can't even lead yourself. And Coach Lee said that all the time. It's like, dude, if you can't lead yourself, you can't lead young men, And so there's some dudes out there where I'm like, wow, I really hope that whomever's doing the hiring process did their due diligence. And then when I see that person got hired, it's like, obviously they didn't do their due diligence, because bad deal there for you. So, yeah, I mean, you were lucky enough to work under a really, really good head coach who you talk about, and I've been talking about this a lot lately, like firm foundation. Like, one thing that I found interesting the last few years to me is like the studying of the styles of leadership. Like, do you lead, and I probably need to create categories here, right? But like, or buckets, if you will. Do you lead off of fear? Do you lead off of like fellowship? do you lead off of pure example? Like what? Because everybody is going to fit into a style, and so it's interesting. Like and then based on that style, is that style creating a foundation that is allowing the next guy to continue to be great? Because like I'll go out and say it, like I think it would be like, and it was like it's very hard for somebody to come in and try to continue the style that Trent Dilfer did. Like, do I think he set a foundation? Yes. But like, is that replicable from anybody else besides him? No. Not saying that other styles like you can just copy. I'm not saying that, but like the way that which he goes about a program, like to me, that's night and day different than what Bill Elliott does. And and again, in my opinion, I think it's a little bit easier to come in and probably replicate a foundation of one that which Bill Elliott would provide. Again, I didn't coach under him. I just know from hearing you speak. I would like to hear your kind of perspective on this, but it's always interesting to me. It's like, okay, what foundation is this dude building? Is he building the foundation for him and him alone, which maybe that's all you need for it to work, to win. And you're not worried about the next guy, which I get that, but there's some head coaches that create a foundation where it's like, wow, like whoever comes in can just keep this thing rolling because he has done such a good job of laying this foundation.
Yeah, I think that Coach Elliott's talking about those kind of categories. Coach Elliott's leadership style was like, it was by example. Like he's never going to ask an assistant and he's never going to ask a kid to do anything that he hasn't already done or is willing to do.
Yeah.
He was the first one out that, when we would get over there and it's time to set up for off-season drills, he's the first guy picking up, battle ropes to carry him outside. He's the first guy loading up the kettlebells into the gator to drive him onto the field. It was never – now there were situations where like, hey, I have to do admin, like AD stuff. Right. I need these things taken care of. But there were consistent reminders of like, he used to always tell me, not just me, he told everybody, but I felt like I got to hear it more because he knew what my aspirations were, was that, you can never be above mucking the stalls. It doesn't matter if you own the horses. Like you can never be above mucking the stalls. And so when the equipment room would get a little unorganized, he would say, hey, we need to take this day and we need to devote an hour of, getting this thing back the way it should. And he's right there in the trenches. When guys pull up to recondition helmets or shoulder pads, he's right there helping load. Right. And I think the thing like that's the version of leadership that I saw for a long time. And so that's what I want to emulate. And I think that the hard part of that, from my perspective, is I've got to find the balance of emulating lead by example with a balance of delegation.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you just train your brain one track to, well, I just got to lead, they got to know that I'm willing to do this too. Well, then that leads to your plate being way too full and everybody trying to wonder, well, am I supposed to turn and run with this? And one thing I heard this week that really resonated with me is that the easiest way to remind your team as a leader, that you're there to support them and that you trust them, is help them in the monotonous ways, right? Be the guy that refills the printer or changes the ink cartridge. Be the guy that flips the laundry. Don't be the guy that like your version of helping is like, okay, well, I went ahead and finished all those blitz tags, right? Because that's something that guy's going to take pride in. What they're going to want the relief in, and the thing that's going to reaffirm their confidence in you as a leader, is you picking up the slack on the things that nobody really wants to do, right? You got a grass field, be the head coach that goes out and mows it every once in a while. Be the guy that goes in there and flips the laundry. Because those are the things that might get lost in the shuffle, or, the equipment room might get off stagger, and you can make a big deal about it, or you can say, hey, let's just get in here, spend 30 minutes and get this thing the way it's supposed to. And that's kind of where I would say on this path that I am. But I also heard, I was listening to Coach Kaz, who, we don't interact very often anymore, but, and he doesn't know this probably to the extent that I wish he did, but Coach Kaz has molded countless great men, and within that list, countless great coaches, because of the things that he instilled in us that we didn't even recognize at the time. And I listening to him last week, he talked about, coaches are always telling guys like, we're going to make you great leaders. We're going to show you how to be great leaders. And the harsh reality is you've got to be able to identify who can be a great leader and who's a great manager, because they're not the same thing. Those are not synonymous words.
Right.
A manager can handle a task and delegate to a great extent. A leader can take people in an all-encompassing manner to places that they probably didn't have on their radar, and reset the course when they get off track, and remotivate and help establish their own discipline within them, and being able to identify the difference between a leader and a manager, I think is huge, especially in this profession, because there's so many different levels of communication and interaction that go on a daily basis within every program.
That's a great point. It's a really good point. I like that. I was talking to Jordan Matthews. This is probably, he comes in here every day and heats up his breakfast. He's like on year 11 or 12 now in the NFL. And you and I need to talk about, he put, this is totally a side conversation, but he made a list that he said he's been studying over the years of basically 5 buckets of every receiver in there is ever: high school, NFL, college, whatever. Like, you'd be really into it. And every one of them fit in these buckets, and really only one of them is attainable. Anyway, it's really good. So yeah, we were talking, and the example, because I think once he gets them finished, and he's going to explore going into coaching or something in the realm of and knowing Jordan, he can if he wants to be a GM, he could be a GM. If he wants to be whatever, he can do it. But I was giving him an example. I was like, well, here's my experience watching head coaches. And whenever I become a head coach, the metaphor I'm going to use, some may not be able to comprehend, maybe because I'm an idiot and I don't explain it very well. But it's almost as if you're writing your signature on this program. Like, whenever I become head coach, I might use the style of T that Trent Dilfer used. I might use the style of a E that Coach Purser used. These are all my former head coaches. I probably won't use one letter from another coach I coached under, and that's okay. I will use the majority of my letters from Coach Lee. But once I finish that signature, you're going to see Trenton Kirkland. I think some head coaches, they do that same thing, and then when they look back and they look at their signature, it doesn't say their name. It says whomever they just copied everything from. And I think that is where, to me, no matter what you do, pick, pull, take from this, take from that. But when you look back, you're going to be able to sleep better at night knowing that you got fired or you got promoted and it's your signature, not, oh my gosh, I was doing somebody else's. And so that's kind of what we were discussing this weekend. And so I think, you've obviously got a good example from Coach Elliott. I'm sure a lot of those letters in your name are used from Coach Elliott, but what you're doing a great job of, from what you've been telling me, and from what I've seen thus far, is that no matter, at the end of the day, when you put that stamp on it, it says Travis McLean. And it's very important whether you get fired or you get hired, because it's your name, and you can die and you can live with that.
That was in a more specific, detailed way. That was one of the hard lessons when I was an OC that I had to learn. And one of the things that I think you and I talked about was, if I'm going to lose, I'm going to lose being myself. That doesn't mean I'm going to be unprepared. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to do my due diligence and do my homework and come with a great plan. But I would much rather lose being 100% confident in whatever the plan is and it just not working than trying to be something I'm not and then it not working, because then you've created this seed of doubt of, well, if I had just been myself, how different would things have been? Right. And so that was a huge turning point, stepping stone for me, because then you have to be able to have the self-reflection of, okay, well, when somebody asks you who you are, what's the answer? Right. And if I don't have the confidence to answer that with very specific talking points and very specific details, then I haven't identified that yet. And that's a huge piece of being a leader. How do you lead? I would never say that. You can look at my facial hair and know that I'm not a carbon copy of Coach Elliott. You know, we do wear short socks the majority of the year. And we aren't always clean shaven, but that's not to say when I was there, I was all in on that because he had a very specific purpose and that had a very specific history within the program that was attached to the success and the winning. And he wanted to continue that tradition, but it wasn't tradition just for tradition's sake. There was a meaning behind it. There was a message behind it. And that's why he was all in on it. And that's why we were all in on it as a staff. You can't just go and do things because they do things. You can't tell people, well, Alabama doesn't, you know, Nick Saban didn't let guys wear hats in the building. Okay, but did Nick Saban have a conversation about why? Because I've worked for guys that made those comments and I didn't understand it.
Yep.
And you have too.
So as I say, you and I both there.
And
you and I both.
And so I think that that's a huge part of it. Whoever you are and whoever your program is going to be, whatever type of leader you're going to be, if you're a leader versus a manager, you better be able to clearly and concisely say, this is our identity, not our brand, not our tagline, but this is who we are, right? Your foundation of building people. And every pillar within that foundation better have a why. Because if your answer is because they do it or because we've always done it, then it is going to be the first piece to crumble. So,
dude, good talks here right now. These are good.
To pivot back to the players, I saw something yesterday that I've kind of said to guys for a while, but I think it's become even more of a point of emphasis when it comes to the recruiting game. I think as coaches, we should be telling our players to commit not immediately, but as quickly as possible because of the current recruiting world where a high school kid's they're competing against 4-year eligible JUCO guys, Division II guys that end up being All-Americans, FCS guys that end up being all conference, you know, plus anybody returning you're competing against so many more bodies, but those bodies are 20, 21, 22. They're mature grown men. And so it's a lot easier for colleges to cool off on the 18-year-old when they can go find something immediate. So that's something that I've kind of alluded to with guys in the past few years, but I think now needs to be a major point of emphasis for high school coaches. Like you need to be looking to commit aggressively. So if somebody falls in love with you, you need to take an unofficial. You need to be doing your due diligence, doing your homework, figuring out what it is that you like or don't like about this place and start making those decisions quicker instead of waiting to have as many graphics piled up in your Twitter feed as possible. Because I think that outside of a small elite contingency of recruits, the number of kids getting 40 plus offers every year I think it's, you know, a fraction of what it was even 4 years ago.
Yeah, I agree. Great point there. I would say the perspective of it is 10 years ago, maybe like eight years ago, you were competing for that spot theoretically as an 18-year-old kid or 16, 17, whatever age you're in. You are competing with other, let's just say it's a like a Ohio State or something like that, so a big school. You're competing with probably 4 to 5 other of kids your age for that specific spot. You had a little bit more leeway there based on how good you were compared to the other kids. My point in saying that is now if you are that 18, 16, 17-year-old kid, you're competing with hundreds of other 20-plus-year-olds. And that's why, to your point, it's like, dude, if you get an offer, A, what a blessing that is. B, if it feels right, you better commit. Like, otherwise, you might not have it anymore. I just witnessed it here with one of our kids here who, I think he's a 3-star and unfortunately now, like, doesn't really have a home to go to. And whether some offers were committable or not, I'm talking like Tennessee type offers were committable or not, can't even go anywhere right now. And other issues there from a communication perspective, which comes back to, to treat everybody like Nick Saban from, Division I to NAIA and JUCO. But also, like, you wait too long, you won't have a home. And if you're a high school kid, you get an offer. You're lucky you even got the offer these days. I mean, we talk about it all the time on this podcast, Travis. Like, there's kids that you and I could have easily landed Division II. We can't even give them Division III now. Maybe even JUCO, probably not anymore. And it's just like, and these kids don't understand the perspective of which we see it. So they're a little confused because they're boys just 3 years ago who maybe they were better than were able to go Division II. And it's like, no, you don't understand how drastic things have changed within the last few years. Like, yeah, you were better than Johnny 3 years ago, but 3 years ago, the portal was not like this. So
Well,
it's a big problem.
It's not just the, like, because I think there's the general masses kind of lump it all together, like, oh, when they made the transfer portal, like, you know, immediately eligible. Well, that was just phase one.
Right.
Because your first transfer was immediate eligible, but then the original change was that your next transfer was a year out. And then that didn't last. I don't even think it lasted a full calendar year. And then every transfer is immediate. And I think that it's creating a double-edged sword where I think there's a flip side to this conversation that needs to be had with college coaches. And I highly doubt any of them listen to us. But just because a guy played in the MAC and was first team all conference doesn't mean that he can play in the Big 12.
Mm-hmm.
Just because a guy was, you know, first team WAC doesn't mean he can play in the Big 10. And
Right.
I'm curious to see who's going to be the first person to do the study of NIL money spent on failed transfers, on transfer ups, right? Because of that, I think transfer downs will be more successful than transfer ups from a general standpoint. But the difference between a transfer down versus a transfer up is the cost.
Yeah.
How many six-figure NIL deals have gone to guys who transfer up and then don't play or play horribly and get benched? And then they're hurt and then they, you know, are not on the roster by the end of the season.
Right.
I mean, you're talking this. The crazy thing about this is in this day and age, college football now produces some of the quietest 8-4 seasons that you will ever see in your entire life. 8-4 used to be, for certain programs, a decent measuring stick. 8-4 used to be, okay, we're stepping in the right direction. And I have seen fans of programs that went 8-4 be legitimately upset and not even aware of what their final record was because of how much everything has changed and how high the expectation. Well, we can go get guys from anywhere, so we should be able to compete with anybody anywhere. That's not the environment you're creating. You better make sure that, like, I know there's a video of the SMU staff talking about they only signed 7 kids out of, I think it was the 24 class, high school kids out of the 24 class. And it's like, okay, if that's, and I understand that you feel as though the market pressure says this is how we have to manage our roster, but how many years of that is going to lead you to have a certain reputation with any high school athlete? And now you may only take 7 in 24, but you may only be able to get 5 in 27 because of that style of operation. Mm-hmm. So I think that I think it's a double-edged sword. You know, if you're gonna go this route, you better make sure that you are doing your due diligence as a college coach. And I would err on the side of not being afraid to invest that extra 18 months into figuring out if a high school kid's going to pan out because you offered him for some reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think their argument's always going to come back to the certainty. It's the certainty that this kid can play, in the MAC. And he's proved it. This high school kid hasn't proved he can play in college. And I'm not sure that I have another 6 months. I'm not sure I have another 8. That's going to be their argument. But what's interesting is, like, I have seen more coaches over the last year come through our office, and it could be totally recruiting. Like, if they're smart, it'd be from a recruiting perspective that they would say this, that are going back to, I think we just need to invest more into the high school kids. Part of me is like, you're lying, because, like, you're trying to just make sure that we hear you say that and, like, hey, Johnny, you better go to him because he believes in high schoolers. Like, that's what I would do if I was a college coach. But And the other part of me, I do think that some of it, because of um, the lack of stability from some of these actions that they're taking from a portal perspective, um, it is a little bit more suitable to have a kid that's been in your program as a redshirt freshman, and now he's a freshman, and now he's actually playing as a redshirt sophomore, or whatever, and he's been in your defensive system or offensive system for some time. That might be more advantageous, obviously, than a kid that you're trying to kind of hurry up and rush it, as if he was an NFL free agent, and just hopefully he gets a vernacular in 3 months and learns it. So I do think that it might be changing, but until they make major changes, I think the majority will still rely on the transfer portal kids.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that there's just, I feel like we touch on this in different variations, on a monthly basis, but we just got to get to a certain point that there's any level of accountability, right?
Yeah.
Because it's setting a precedent and it's setting a standard that is, I mean, there's a trickle down effect, right? Like, I mean, you look at staffs that the turnover rate, right? Like your position doesn't perform in a specific year, and like you said, the uncertainty from a job security standpoint, like they might just pull the trigger and that guy might be out. And like, I just think that's wrong. You brought that guy there, you hired him. What are you doing to make sure that he can do his job adequately? To me, that's a cop out. Like, and that's another thing that I felt like I had those kind of conversations or kind of got to witness with Coach Elliott, is that like, you don't just cut a guy loose, right? There's got to be an attempt to develop. Now, you only get so many of those, right?
Right.
You don't just keep a guy around forever.
Correct.
But if you as the head coach, as you as the offensive or defensive coordinator, if you've got a guy on staff that you brought in, that you brought to that place, and their room isn't performing, what kind of leader are you that your cold calculated decision is, oh, well, this is a business, so we're just going to cut them loose. Well, again, that trickle down effect from that decision goes straight into the locker room, because now they know that's how you view all the pieces. Everybody's replaceable. And that works in corporate America, because that's a very clear, explicit, upfront expectation. That doesn't work in the people business. And that's what you and I have ad nauseum discussed. That's what we're in. We're in the people business.
Correct.
And you can't cut ties like that in the people business if you want to have any type of longevity. I think that's one of the coolest things about Nick Saban's rehabilitation center for fired coaches.
That's a good point.
He's not afraid to put guys that have clearly fallen from grace and clearly blown opportunities, put them on staff, put them in hard situations, and develop them, and not make it here's a handout. It's a hand up. And you just, when you turn over a roster at the rate that portal and NIL has produced, and you turn over a staff at a similar rate, it's pushing everything transactional.
Right.
And guess what? The high school ranks, they're going to do the exact same thing, because that's the example that they're seeing. When a high school kid graduates and he's had 3 head coaches in his high school career, and none of them have won more than 6 games, that's not, like, at some point, administration and community, there's got to be self-reflection.
Right.
And I just hope that, I feel like that's getting lost in the shuffle from, like, I know you and I talk about it, and guys in the profession talk about it, and women in the profession talk about it, but I would just hope that it's becoming a little bit more noticeable to the outside world, because it creates a really hard environment to be in the people business when you operate that way.
Agreed. I totally agree with that.
Lighter note. Got kind of heavy. Lighter note.
It's real heavy.
It's off season, but we're still watching football. I know you probably watched 20 hours this week. I want to hear the best high school football performance you ever witnessed.
Yeah. I think I will say personally that I've seen on my team, it's a season. I can't really put it to a game. I'm sure if I really thought about it, I could probably figure out a one game performance that was like stupid. Um, but Chase Griffin, when I was at Hutto, his yearly performance was insane. I mean, he had 51 touchdown passes, 3 interceptions, well over 4,000 yards passing. But he had in his career, like I think he was like over 100 and something, well over 100 touchdown passes in his career. He's like top 5 in Texas. Um, but I mean, for him to have all that, averaging maybe 370 passing yards a game, I think is what it was. Um, Stupid. I mean, even the touchdown to interception ratio alone is ridiculous. But to me, that's one of the best performance. Obviously, I'm biased, but it's because it's coming from a quarterback too. Um, and to do that off of like what you generally see from quarterbacks that are good their sophomore year, kill it, absolutely kill it the junior year. I would argue there's a heavy, heavy percentage leaning on their senior year, never as good, like never as good. And for him to just continue to get better every single year, that was very, very impressive. So I would say Chase. What about you?
Well, before I give my answer, I do want to point this out. I would say it's not a whole game performance, but this right here was one of the coolest performances we ever got to see. So this is 2018,
Yep.
the first part one, Duncanville North Shore State game. This is a young McLean, and this is a young TK with the little pencil neck and the little flexing tricep.
That boy is thin. I was so thin.
This was really cool because at the time in 18 you were at Hutto, correct?
Yes.
And I was at Salina. You could tell by the bright orange C on the quarter zip there. But so you're coaching really good 5A players, and I'm coaching what I would still consider pretty good 4A players. Yeah. And we stepped onto the sideline and just said, Jesus Christ, like this is Big 10 versus Big 12 right here. This is, every player on that field was a grown man, and it was a little bit of a reminder of the stark difference between classifications in the state of Texas. But that game was back and forth. Jaquindon Jackson, who I think just declared for the NFL, was playing quarterback for North Shore or for Duncanville, and the North Shore quarterback, he ended up going to like Virginia Tech. And this touchdown, Duncanville's up late. This touchdown happens, 15 feet from us. This is not like your rear view mirror. This is exactly how far away we were. And to be on the sideline and witness that was crazy.
Dude, the video went viral. So like, I don't know if you remember how it happened. So
I remember exactly how it happened because I'm
not trying to sound like I'm like I'm not trying to sound like I'm like the guy that like we were there because of me. I'm not saying that. Like
no,
Ryan's
you 100% were.
Ryan Martin obviously is the one that we were with. So we're down on the field, and
we got down there, and this is the most classic TK thing ever. Because like I'm the guy and he knows this. I'm the guy that's like, well, let's follow the action. Like, let's work this corner of the end zone, blah, blah, blah. And we walk out that doorway and you go, we're not chasing the ball. We're going to pick a corner. I don't care where it is, but you go, we're picking a corner and we're staying there the rest of the game.
That's right.
I was like, okay, yeah, I'm good with that. Like, I don't want to walk a ton. And so that was the corner that we picked.
Yeah.
And then it played out that way.
Well, it was perfect because like Jaquindon and them were going downfield to go score. And like you could feel they were going to score. And obviously they scored, right? And so it was like, well, we're not going to go down there. Let's just stay right here. The ball's going to end here, whatever. And North Shore gets the ball, and they are obviously, I think they're on the minus 40. And the defense that was being played from Duncanville was very shocking. Shockingly not soft. Like, what is going on? And then all of a sudden, it gets to the Hail Mary time, and I'm like, I can't remember what they were doing, but it wasn't like a legit prevent. It was like maybe it was like a quarter or something like that. I can't remember what it was, but I was like, what is going on? Like, and I think that was a quarterback at North Shore that had been there for like 3 years, right? The starter that you said went to Virginia Tech. Can't remember his name. Something with a D. But throws it up, and we're literally like probably could take 2 steps and touch them close to him in the end zone. catches it. If I remember correctly, one of them like messed up their ankle pretty bad. Um, and I think it was Ryan that was filming it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ryan's filming it. Video goes viral. Like his video is the one that went like ESPN, like everywhere.
Yeah.
And we're all screaming because it happened. And obviously, that was one of the most. I think even like so many like famous people have commented on it, and it was like wow because it's like, dude, we're literally right here. And to your point too, seeing the difference of 6A players compared to where we were at, whoa, like, dude, different, and not to go out on a limb here, but it's just so to me special to see the difference there, and it not be like a private school. Like, these are guys that are just Duncanville dudes or North Shore dudes. Do they have a couple transfers? Yes, they do, but like it's different than whenever Governor Abbott trying to push this voucher thing and everybody's transferring to schools. Like the incompetence there is absurd, but yeah, so like it just makes it that much more special to me, and that was one of the football moments in my life that I'll never forget. And obviously, it's because I was with some of my best friends, and to witness that was so cool.
TK taking shots from the Rocky Mountain State of just just letting them know like don't mess with us.
Yep.
But that's not so. That was really cool because we were there. I couldn't tell you who caught the ball. I just know the teams that were playing.
Yeah,
I guess it's the Smoky Mountain State. I'm gonna get roasted for that.
dude. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yep, you said
my
that,
performance that I witnessed that like I'll never forget. Partially because of locale, but also because it was genuinely impressive, was Jonathan Gray at Aledo. And not even, yes, his career was freakish. I mean, to rush for almost 11,000 yards in high school in 5A is absurd. Yeah. But in the state game, his junior year, they played Lamarck, which I don't even know. There were talks of Lamarck shut down. I don't even know if it's open anymore. Mm-hmm. He scored 8 rushing touchdowns in a state championship football game. And for those keeping tabs, that's 2 per quarter. And that's a lot. There's guys that get Division I offers off of 8 rushing touchdowns in a season. Mm-hmm. And my man Jay Gray had 8 in the state game. And he followed that up with a senior year that had 65 touchdowns. So was plagued with injuries when he got to UT, mm-hmm. which I hated, even though a part of me kind of hates UT. But I love seeing, great guys at the high school level be great at the college level because I think it breaks some of the stereotypes of the state of Texas when it comes to it. I hate hearing that like, oh, well, they're just really good in high school because they have, they peaked. Those high school coaches got everything out of them they could. And I think guys that can do that at the high school level, it doesn't matter to a certain extent. It doesn't matter the measurables or the facilities. I think that there's a piece of them that they're just competitors. They're just winners. Mm-hmm. So I hated him, having that injury plague run at UT, but I remember watching that state game. I was in college watching that state game, like sitting in my apartment on, Fox Sports Southwest, RIP, and him just absolutely dismantling Lamarck's defense. And I mean, Aledo was chock full of talent, but mm-hmm. to me, that was one of the wildest single game performances to witness, especially because it was a 5A state game. Or I guess was it 4A at the time? I don't know. It was the second highest classification in the state, and he broke that record on that stage. So shout out Jonathan Gray, wild performance. Yeah, but I still hate it.
That was the year of Jonathan Gray. I mean, literally every when you turned on Fox Sports Southwest, it was Jonathan Gray. Like, what do you do this week? What do you do this week? And yeah, that team was absolutely loaded. Those years of Aledo were absurd, absolutely absurd. But that to your point, that game was insanity.
But also, I need to point this out. I don't actually hate Aledo, but growing up in Weatherford and having a school smaller than you be your big brother was just so demoralizing.
Hey, do you want to give a shout out real quick? This is like that has nothing to do with anything we're talking about. I saw recently a very sentimental post that you'd made. A pie shop or something is shutting down.
R.I.P. to the GOAT, Hutch's Pie Shop in Weatherford, Texas. After like 93 years, I think it was what it ended up being of being open. God just got tired and shut it down.
I'd be tired too after 93 years.
Well, he didn't do it for
I'm
93
joking.
years. Jeez, he's not one of the guys collecting Social Security at 150. But
Shout out Doge.
so my junior and senior year of high school, every day I'd pick up my best friend, and we would go to Hutch's for breakfast every day, and we'd get the same thing. And the lady working the counter, it was always the same person. And by the time my truck parked and we walked in the door, she was already making our plates. We sat at the same table. Like there wasn't a reserve sign on it, but everybody knew. And this was back before, you know, I don't feel old, but this is aging myself. Like grab the sports section, see who's the leading rusher, see who's the leading receiver, see who's the leading passer in the Metroplex, see what numbers were put up, see what matchups are coming up. I mean, that was every day. See what Connor Tucker did at Pascal High School playing basketball so we could go make fun of him whenever Weatherford played him in basketball. I mean, I had an old man routine at 16 years old, and I loved every second of it. And when I went to college, when I started working at Salina, anytime I went home, I would make sure that at least once I went up there, grabbed breakfast. And shout out to Mom. She drove up there and spent like almost $50 on pies and froze them so I can have them to reheat in the air fryer and enjoy a couple more times since their doors have closed forever.